What is it that transforms the widow's mite into an abundance? It is love. What is it that turns the words of the simple man into wisdom? It is love. What is it that never changes when all else changes? It is love, and only that is love which never becomes anything else. For the pagans also praised love, its beauty and its power, but that love could become something else, which they praised even more highly. Love was beautiful, more beautiful than anything else, but revenge was sweet, sweeter than all else. And so foolish was the pagan thought about love and about the heavenly, so selfish was everything both in heaven and on earth, that the power which benevolently bestowed the joy of love on mankind enviously reserved revenge for itself, because it was the sweeter. What wonder then that the idea of revenge was concealed in all pagan love, that fear was not cast out, even if it was forgotten. What wonder that the enemy worked in stillness, even when love slept soundest. What wonder that resentment secretly laid in wait and watched for an opportunity. What wonder that it suddenly burst forth in all its fierceness. What wonder that it completely filled the pagan soul, which imbibed its forbidden sweetness, and thereby assured itself of its kinship with the heavenly. What wonder that no love was happy, as no man was in paganism, until his last hour was come, which again could only bitterly mock a man with the idea that he had been happy. What wonder that sorrow was mingled in every joy, that even in the moment of gladness, the next moment constantly loomed as alarmingly as the shadow of death. How then could a pagan be able to overcome the world? But if he could not do this, how could he be able to gain the world? What is it that is never changed when all else changes? It is love, and only this is love which never becomes something else. For the pious Jew also bore witness to love, but his love was the child of mutability and change, and he knew how to hate his enemy. He even ascribed vengeance to the Lord, because he himself had it. His own soul was not unacquainted with its sweetness. Then, too, was this consciousness sweet, that the Lord's vengeance is more terrible than human vengeance, that a man curses his enemy, but the Lord curses the ungodly and the family of the ungodly through many generations. What wonder, then, that fear always kept one eye open, even when love was least concerned? What wonder that resentment quietly sat and reckoned up the things given and the things received, the thine and mine, even when love least dreamed of it? What wonder that no love was happy until the last hour came, because not till then was love's uncertain demand perfectly redeemed. What is it that is never changed, even if all else changes? It is love. And only this is love which never becomes something else. This which gives everything, and because of this demands nothing. This which demands nothing, and therefore has nothing to lose. This which blesses, and blesses when it is cursed. This which loves its neighbor, but whose enemy is also his neighbor. This which leaves vengeance to the Lord, because it comforts him to believe that the Lord is even more merciful than he himself is. It is this love the Apostle Peter speaks about in the text we read. And as this love many times and in many ways received the testimony of the Apostle, so here again he bears witness to its power when he says, "Love shall cover a multitude of sins." Works of Love by Soren Kierkegaard, 1847. Translated from the Danish by David F. Swenson and Lilian Marvin Swenson in 1946. Princeton University Press. Volume 2, Chapter 7, pages 255 to 257. Mercy, a work of love, even if it can give nothing and can do nothing. But to do good and communicate, forget not. But neither forget that this incessant worldly talk about charity and benevolence, and generosity and liberality, and gifts and donations, is almost unmerciful. Oh, let news writers and tax gatherers and parish beadles talk about generosity, and count the receipts. But let us never fail to realize that Christianity essentially speaks about mercy. That Christianity would be the last of all to reward the unmerciful, as if the poor and the wretched were not only in want of money and so on, but were also excluded from the highest power of all, that of being able to show mercy, because they are not able to be generous, charitable, and benevolent. But one preaches and preaches, ecclesiastically and secularly, about liberality and generosity. One forgets, even while delivering the sermon, about mercy. This, from the Christian standpoint, is an indecency. The poor man who sits in church must groan. And why must he groan? Is it so that his groaning, together with the preacher's eloquence, might help to get the purse strings of the rich opened up? Oh no, he must groan in the scriptural sense. He must groan against the preacher, because just when he is so eager to help him, one suffers the greatest injustice. Woe to the one who consumes the inheritance of the widow and the fatherless. But woe too to the preacher who keeps silent about mercy in order to speak about charity. The preaching should be solely and alone about mercy. If you know how to speak effectively about that, then will the benevolence follow as a matter of course, in proportion to the individual ability. But consider this, that if a man by talking about charity procured money, consider this, that by keeping silent about mercy, he acted unmercifully toward the very poor and wretched, for whom he secured relief through the help afforded by the rich gifts of charity. Consider this, that if the poor and the wretched disturb us by their petitions, we may be able to get their poverty relieved by charity. But then consider that it would be far more terrible if we forced the poor and the wretched to hinder our prayers by groaning against us to God, as the Scriptures say, because we atrociously treated the poor and the wretched unfairly by not telling them that they can practice mercy. We shall in this talk about mercy keep close to this thought, and to guard ourselves against confusing mercy with what really belongs to external conditions, over which, consequently, as such, love has no control, while it does truly have mercy in its power, just as certainly as love has a heart in its bosom. Because a man has a heart in his bosom, it by no means follows that he has money in his pocket, but the former is far more important, and is certainly decisive as regards mercy. And truly, if one had no money, but really knew how to encourage and inspire the poor and the wretched by talking about mercy, then he would have done quite as much as the one who throws some money to the poor, or holds forth about charity from the rich. So we shall meditate on mercy, a work of love, even if it can give nothing and can do nothing. We shall strive, according to the ability granted us, to make it as obvious as possible, as alluring as possible, to bring as close home to the poor as possible what consolation there is for him in being able to be merciful. We shall speak about this by doing away with a part of the worldly illusion. But truly our desire is, by means of what we say, to contribute whatever is needed to make the one who can be charitable and benevolent as humble as possible in his giving, as it is well pleasing unto God, as modest in divine shyness as is becoming to a Christian, as willing to give and yet as unwilling to confess that it is alms, as is the one who turns away his face in order not to be ashamed by others, seeing that it brings him honor. or as the one whose left hand actually does not know what the right hand does. Mercy has nothing to give. It follows as a matter of course that if the merciful has anything to give, then he gives it most willingly. But it is not on this that we focus our attention, but on the fact that one can be merciful without having the least thing to give. And this is of great importance, since the fact of being able to be merciful is a far greater perfection than having money, and hence being able to give. If that man celebrated for 1800 years, the Good Samaritan, had not been riding but walking on the way from Jericho to Jerusalem, where he saw the unfortunate man lying, if he had carried nothing with him with which to bind up his sores, if he had then lifted the unfortunate man up, laid him upon his own shoulders, and borne him to the nearest inn, where the landlord would under no conditions receive either him or the unfortunate, because the Samaritan did not have even a farthing, and could only beg and beseech the hard-hearted landlord to be merciful, since a man's life was at stake. If he had not, therefore— Still, no, the story is not even finished. Hence, if the Samaritan now, far from losing patience because of this, had again gone on, carrying the unfortunate man, had looked for a softer bed for the wounded, had sat by his side, had done everything he could to staunch the flow of blood, but the unfortunate man had died on his hands, would he not then have been just as merciful, quite as merciful, as that merciful Samaritan? Or would there be any objection to calling this the story of the Good Samaritan? Take the story about the woman who laid the 2 pennies in the temple chest, but let us make a little poetic change in the story. The 2 pennies were to her a great sum, which she had not accumulated all at once. She had saved for a long time in order to get them together, and for that she had treasured them, wrapped up in a little cloth, in which to carry them when she went up to the temple. However, a thief had noticed that she had these pennies, had stolen them from her, and had left a similar cloth in place of hers, which contained nothing, something the widow did not know. Hence she went up to the temple, carrying, as she supposed, the 2 pennies, that is, nothing to the temple box. I wonder if Christ would still not have said what he did say of her, that she gave more than all the rich. Still, mercy without money, what significance has it? Furthermore, the worldly arrogance of charity and benevolence finally goes so far as to laugh at a mercy which has nothing, for it is already bad and revolting enough, this mercilessness of the earthly existence, that when the poor gives his last shilling, and then the rich comes and gives $100, that then all see the $100, that is, that the rich by his gifts entirely obscures the gift of the poor, his mercy. But what madness, if what Christ says is still true, that the poor gave the most. What madness, that the one who gives less, the rich and the great sum, obscures the one who gives more, the poor and the small portion, moreover even obscures the one who gives most. However, of course, the world does not say that. It says that the rich gave most. And why does the world say this? Because the world understands only about money, and Christ only about mercy.